Da-da-da-da-da. Welcome to another exciting edition of Loco Literature Unwound. I'm your host for the evening, Jody Peterson, along with Miss Thole.
Hi, everybody.
Hello!
So I'm here live in room 277.
And today we will be talking about the elements of a story. When you are reading or writing, for that matter, a short story, it is important to keep in mind the plot line.
A plot line, when you think of that, think about the events that connect to one another that move a story along, beginning to end, plot line.
And there are 5 major plot points. Some teachers will give you more information about rising action and falling action. We're going to stick with the 5 skeleton pieces. The first one is exposition. Notice in the word exposition, see it below, expose is the root word, to expose. So if you have a sensitive tooth and it is exposed to ice cream, right, you're finding out about some new pain.
In the exposition, in the beginning, we find out things like the setting, who the main characters are, and what is the main conflict. What is the main character or protagonist trying to solve or overcome in this story?
Conflict is the next thing on the plot line. The conflict is the main problem of the story.
Conflict, there's all sorts of different kinds, but typically we break it down into external versus internal, right? So external, outside the body, things like man versus man.
And in that one, there is either some sort of argument between 2 characters or a physical fight of some sort. That is external conflict.
Like if we threw down about whose room it really is. That's not gonna happen. Just kidding.
That'd be an external.
Are you gonna talk about man versus tiger next?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm not. Well,
External conflict.
I guess man versus nature. So yeah, if there was a tiger and I had to fight it, that would be an external conflict, man versus nature. Usually when we think about man versus nature, we're thinking like, what's that movie?
A blizzard.
What's the movie with Tom Hanks?
Castaway.
Castaway. So where he's like out on a deserted island and he needs to, live, fight the elements so he can live. A blizzard is another good example, not the kind from Dairy Queen.
Blizzard.
Yeah. What would that be? Would that be an example of internal conflict? Shouldn't I?
I don't know.
Should I eat all 3 of the Dairy Queen blizzards instead of deciding just one? That would be an internal conflict.
Especially if you're lactose intolerant.
Me.
Man versus nature. Books. Most of you have read Hatchet. That is an example of man versus nature, which is external conflict. Meep, meep. Internal conflict. This is man versus himself.
Internal, what's going on inside a character's mind or heart? Are they struggling with some kind of mental illness, or are they struggling to make some kind of really important life decision? Those are internal conflicts.
You witnessed a crime. Should you go to the police and let them know what's going on? Although you may be risking your own safety, I think that covers it for conflict. All right, complications, those are other small issues that pop up. So when you are trying to solve your main problem, little things just keep popping up, getting in the way. Those are complications.
So let's talk about how the Grinch stole Christmas, right? So our Grinch, he's the protagonist, the main character, and his external conflict is with the Who's down in Whoville because they love to celebrate Christmas and the Grinch doesn't, right? His internal conflict is the fact that his heart is 2 sizes too small. Remember? So he just doesn't have a lot of room for love in his heart yet at the beginning of the story. So some of the complications that come up in that story when the Grinch decides that he's going to steal Christmas from the Who's down in Whoville is he needs a reindeer, right? He can't be Santa if he doesn't have a reindeer. So how does he solve that complication? He turns his cute little dog Max into a reindeer with one antler tied to his head with a bow. I love that part.
The fourth thing on our plot line is the climax. In the climax, that's like the high point of the story. Usually, you're like, it's kind of maybe a nail biter, like what's gonna happen? And then, oh, okay, we get it all kind of figured out. But we're like, whoa, because it's the most intense part of the story.
The climax is the high point or the turning point in the story. It's when we know how the major conflict is going to be solved, if and when and how it's going to be solved. In the case of the Grinch, it's when he realizes that he doesn't want to steal Christmas. That's our turning point. And he rushes back down the mountain with all the presents and brings everything back to the town.
And then we have our resolution at the end.
The end of the story. So when things are being resolved, our root word there.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the problem's all tied up in a nice little bow. For example, if the main character is deathly ill and dies, the problem has not been solved because now, right, they're without the main character. Terrible. But it is resolved in that the climax of the story is that the character passed away, but the resolving portion might be the funeral. Or it might be people kind of moving on with their lives after the fact.
In The Grinch, it's when he is singing with the Who's and they have their Christmas and he feels a part of their community and they're all around the table and they're eating the roast beast. Isn't that what they call it? The roast beast. Okay. Setting is not just where a story takes place, but also sometimes when can be really, really important. So does it take place in fall or winter? Is it present day or in the past? When we're talking about The Grinch, we do know that it takes place in the mountainous region around Whoville and that it's at Christmas time.
All right, so we are going to be talking about characterization.
There's two types of characterization, direct characterization and indirect characterization. Direct characterization, your narrator tells you straight up, this is the way it is. For example, Martha was a selfish wench and everybody knew it. That is direct characterization. You don't have to infer anything. You have been told. You don't need to think about it, wonder about it. Oh, I bet you it sounds like. You don't have to do any of that. Because the narrator told you, Martha, not a good person. Told you straight up. That is direct characterization. You were directly told.
The Grinch was mean because his heart was 2 sizes too small.
Indirect characterization. The narrator allows you to infer, which means figure out, kind of fill in the blanks about what's going on with the character.
So indirect characterization, we will use the mnemonic device STEAL to remember that. Speech, thoughts, effect on others, actions, and looks. STEAL.
What did Shrek say that you can make an inference about? What was he thinking? How did he affect others? What are his actions? What does he look like? So Shrek is a big green ogre. And just by seeing him, his looks, you could tell, you can infer that he's probably kind of a scary guy.
So, indirect characterization develops a character through their actions, speech, thoughts, looks, effect on others, all that good stuff.
So that's indirect characterization.
When you're talking about characters, we have a protagonist, the main character, the character who is trying to overcome the major conflict in the story.
Some people will say that the protagonist is the good guy, but that's not necessarily true. So don't say that. Because, for example, Despicable Me, Gru is the protagonist, and he's a bad guy. Now notice pro, the prefix pro in protagonist. Pro means for something, like if you are pro-life or whatever, you are for it. He is for solving the problem.
And then you have typically an antagonist, someone who is working against the protagonist or trying to impede his or her ability to solve the conflict.
The antagonist, A-N-T, you see is like anti, which means against. So the antagonist is trying to stop the protagonist from solving the problem. He's getting in the way. He's being annoying. Some people will say that the antagonist is the bad guy. But again, not necessarily true. So remember, the antagonist is trying to stop the protagonist from solving the problem.
A dramatic character is a character who changes over the course of the story. The events forever alter the character's personality or life to the point where they'll never be the same as they were in the beginning of the story.
A dramatic character has an epiphany, realizes something, makes a change to his or her character by the end of the story.
A static characters stay the same. They're exactly the same in the beginning as they are at the end. They don't experience any kind of growth or change over the course of the story.
Sometimes you know how your mom will put a dryer sheet in the dryer and it's to get rid of static, but every once in a while that dryer sheet will get caught in your pants leg, and then you're at school and you're like, what the heck is in here that's itching me? And then you pull it out. Static sticks. So there's not a lot of change. It stays the same. A static character does not change. Finally, about characters, you can have a round character or a flat character. A flat character, we don't know very much about them. They're sort of one-dimensional. We know that they're crabby. That's all we know. A round character, we kind of know what motivates them, what makes them tick. So if it's a crabby character, we might find out the reason why they're crabby is because maybe there was a death in the family, and this person has just been kind of wrecked. They're a broken person and they take out their bitterness on others. But, a flat character, we just know they're crabby. A round character, we know why. We see them at home crying. We see them be kind to someone else. Again, at the beginning of Despicable Me, Gru is just a bad guy. No, we don't know why he's a bad guy. We just know he's a bad guy. But then later on, we find out that actually he's pretty nice to his minions. We find out that his mom was not very encouraging. She compares him to the monkeys in the space program. She belittles him on a regular basis. We find out a lot more about his personality than like we know at the beginning. So Gru turns from what seems to be a flat character into a round character as we see his development. He's more three-dimensional. Da-da-da-da! And that's a wrap for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of Loco Literature Unwound.
Meep, meep. See ya!